With each new Magic set, we get a slew of new legendary creatures, and with them comes new opportunities for commander decks. But sometimes, finding the right way to approach the deck building process can be tricky, and so this video will be your guide to building your next favorite commander deck. If you're working on this deck and have some spicy suggestions or some fun tech, leave it in the comments section below so we can help everyone build this deck to be the best it can be. The deck we look at today is Eriette of the Charmed Apple from Wilds of Eldraine. This 2/4 human warlock costs 1 a white and a black. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. In addition, at the beginning of your end step, each opponent will lose his X life and then you gain X life, where X is the number of auras you control. So Eriette wants you to play auras, which are a type of enchantment that gets attached to specific targets rather than just exist on the battlefield and just do their thing. Oftentimes, aura spells will be used in a Voltron style deck, such as Siona, to make a singular creature powerful, difficult to interact with, and ultimately used to beat an opponent to death. However, Eriette has a unique clause that forces creatures enchanted by our auras to attack other opponents than us, and in a way, enchanting them that they can't see us or our planeswalkers as attack targets. And I think this is a very flavorful twist on what I would otherwise call something like a group slug deck. I want to approach this deck by looking at auras that give powerful buffs, but I will not be using them on creatures we control. Instead, we will want to enchant our opponents' creatures, making them into gigantic threats that just can't attack us. That way we can sit back, relax, watch our opponents hack away at one another, and ultimately finish them off to claim victory. I'm going to walk you through my process for building this deck, so if you're new to the format, new to deck building, or you want to take a crack at building this specific commander, you have the information you need to get your deck started. If you have any suggestions or advice to those who are also looking to watch this video, feel free to comment below. To start, we want to look at our mana ramp. We do have 3 main points to make note of. To start, Eriette is in black and white, and so we are lacking access to mana dorks in green. We're also in an enchantment style build, which normally can ramp and mana fix using enchantments that go on lands and such, but since we aren't in green, we don't have access to those tools either. Instead, we will be using a small but effective assortment of mana rocks. I wanted to make sure we had as much room for our auras as possible, so I kept this section rather slim. I recommend Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Talisman of Hierarchy, and lastly, Orzhov's Signet to serve as your mana rocks. These are cheap and effective mana rocks that will not really hurt our tempo. Our commander costs 3 mana, and so you want Eriette to be your main 3-drop spell early in the game. Something like Chromatic Lantern, I would only recommend as a 3-drop mana rock if you really need help with your mana base, which we'll get into much later on. Now on to our card draw engines. We're able to draw upon some elements of the Enchantress core, and though we don't have access to any of the green inclusive Enchantresses, we do have a few that are perfect for our strategy. Core Spirit Dancer is a 0/2 that gets +2/+2 for each aura attached to it. Whenever you cast an aura spell, you may draw a card. This is a very potent 2-drop, and it effectively serves the same role as the Argothian Enchantress in green. We aren't going to utilize her first ability all that often, as our main strategy is going to be building up opponents' creatures. We do, however, have the ability to pivot in the event of Eriette being rendered unusable through removal and repeated recasts to an aggressive strategy where we just simply build up our own creatures and go the traditional route, in which case Core Spirit Dancer would be the go-to. Mesa Enchantress is the classic Enchantress, letting us draw a card whenever we cast an enchanting spell. Keep in mind that the aforementioned Core Spirit Dancer only triggers off of aura spells, whereas the Mesa Enchantress gives us card draw for all of our enchantment spells. SRAM, Senior Edificer, gives us a card whenever we cast an aura, equipment, or vehicle. If we manage to get the 3 of these cards out at one time, we can get 3 cards whenever we play an aura, making this an effective engine to keep our hand full. Now, our primary goal is to give our opponents some powerful auras on their creatures, with the condition is that those creatures go attack opponents. We have basic enchantments like All That Glitters and Ethereal Armor, which give basic buffs based on the number of enchantments we control. These are excellent to make a singular creature really big, but it's important to note that this only counts the enchantments on the battlefield of the aura's controller, so in this case, us. So while we can enchant an opponent's creature, that creature will get the power and toughness boosts based on our enchantment count. As long as our commander is in play, we don't have to worry about any of these giant creatures coming back at us. Griff's Boon gives +1/+0 and flying, which is pretty sweet evasion on a 1-drop aura. We can also pay 4 and recast the boon from the graveyard, which is great for once the creature that we've enchanted dies. I like this card in this deck for being a 1-drop spell that, while our commander's on the field, will essentially deter whatever problem creature we want from attacking at us. This acts as a weird sort of removal in that we don't have to worry about the enchanted creature so long as Eriette is in play. We're also running some of the Impetus cycle, which addresses one of the weak points of this strategy. See, we can enchant our opponent's creature and then as an extension keep them off our lawn, but we can't make them attack our opponents. But by goading them, they now have to attack, whether they want to or not. And while it's not an aura or an enchantment, I did include Bloodthirsty Blade as one additional source of goading that can be pretty relevant to making sure our opponents have to attack. Along those same lines is Angel's Trumpet, a fun incentive for opponents to have to attack, specifically if they're unable to attack us. See, this gives all creatures vigilance, but at the beginning of their controller's end step, if those creatures did not attack, those creatures get tapped, and then their controller loses 1 life for each creature tapped this way. A fun pair of cards that I've included are 2 that will introduce a lethal dose of Infect to the equation. Glistening Oil and Phyresis, 2 auras that grant Infect to their enchanted creature. This greatly reduces the clock on the game, as our opponents can't swing back at us with their newly infected creatures, and they have to swing at each other instead. And remember, you only need 10 poison counters to lose the game. Glistening Oil is actually really strong in this deck because it has a secondary role as removal by adding a -1/-1 counter each turn. Once the creature it enchants dies and Glistening Oil therefore goes to the graveyard, it then returns to our hand, letting us reuse it again. This is perhaps the best aura in the entire deck as it is incredibly difficult to get rid of. We're also utilizing some of the curse enchantments, as they are also auras as well. These enchant a player, making them even more difficult to get rid of. We have a lot of options in black and white, but I chose ones that will be most beneficial to the table. Curse of Disturbance gives us a 2/2 zombie token whenever the cursed player is attacked, and allows the player doing the attacking to create a 2/2 zombie as well. Curse of Exhaustion gives an element of stacks to the cursed player, only allowing them to cast 1 spell per turn. Curse of Misfortunes is my personal favorite, allowing you each turn to bring out another curse from your library onto the cursed player. We can easily load up all of these curses onto one player to bog them down until they're out. Curse of Shallow Graves reminds me of the Disturbance, though this only gives the attacking player the 2/2 zombie. Curse of Thirst synergizes well with the Curse of Misfortunes, burning the cursed player for the amount of curses attached to them. You can even use the Curse of Misfortunes to bring out the Curse of Thirst, and then really begin bringing the pain. Curse of Vengeance is fun if you know that a player is about to lose as you curse them, to use them later on to gain life and card draw based on the number of spells that they've played from the time that they're cursed to the time that they die. Curse of the Restless Dead has a landfall trigger of sorts, giving us a 2/2 zombie token with Decayed whenever they put a land onto the battlefield under their control. Torment of Scarabs is another curse that forces the player that's cursed to either lose 3 life or sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card at their upkeep. This can be really mean to a player who's already bogged down with multiple curse effects who's trying to stabilize. Trespasser's Curse is perfect for the token player who wants to go wide. Instead, they'll lose 1 life whenever they have a creature enter the battlefield under their control, and then will gain 1 life. Finally, while its front face isn't a curse, Faithbound Judge is my favorite curse. This card is just a nice defense creature while it's in creature form, but once you cast it for its disturb cost while it's in the graveyard, it becomes Sinner's Judgment, another curse with a deadly ability. At the beginning of our upkeep, we put a judgment counter on the Sinner's Judgment. Then if there are 3 or more judgment counters on it, that enchanted player loses the game. If Sinner's Judgment would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, it's exiled instead. So this is really useful at getting rid of one opponent, and this is what many refer to as player removal. So if you're in a pinch and really need to get rid of a player that's threatening to go off, well, here you go. We want to get as much value out of our auras, and so cards that either give us benefit to playing them or help us get them out are key pieces to our strategy. Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist, can help move our auras around to whatever creature would most benefit from them. This can be used defensively to move all of our auras to whatever creature would be able to one-shot an opponent, moving us closer to our endgame. We have Denith the Capuchin, Killian Ink Duelist, Starnheim Courser, and Transcendent Envoy, all of which reduce the mana cost for our aura spells. We have Lightpaws, who has a unique version of Cascade. Whenever an aura enters the battlefield under our control, if we cast it, we can tutor for another aura that costs less and put it into play, attached to Light Paws. This is great to help tutor out some of our best auras at any given point. Hateful Eidolon is great for when our opponents' creatures that we enchant inevitably die, letting us draw a card for each aura we controlled that was attached to it. We also run Ghostly Prison and No Mercy to help protect us. See, our strategy only really works while we have auras on our opponent's creature and Eriette is in play. If those conditions aren't met, we're basically a sitting duck. These will all be nice deterrents, but if we truly need a solid wall, Sphere of Safety is an all-star pillow fort in this deck, making it nearly impossible to effectively attack us. This is one of the best mid to late game cards to play, as our battlefield will be clogged with so many aura cards that our opponents will have to pay tremendous amounts of mana for just a single creature to attack us. Now, the biggest drawbacks to aura cards is, unlike equipments, these go to the graveyard should the creature that they're on dies or leaves the battlefield. To remedy this, we have Auramancer, Retether, Sevinne's Reclamation, and Crystal Chimes to help return our auras back to our hand for reuse. The final section is perhaps the most important, the mana base. I'm a proponent of lanes that don't have to enter the battlefield tapped, as they disrupt our tempo as minimally as possible. We're in black and white, and so with only 2 colors needed, we can run a handful of basics in our land count without substantially impacting our consistency. To that end, besides the standard command tower, I highly recommend Godless Shrine, Isolated Chapel, Caves of Koilos, City of Brass, Mana Confluence, Fetid Heath, Silent Clearing, Bright Climb Pathway, Grim Climb Pathway, Tainted Field, Temple of Silence, and Vault of Champions. We can include Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth to make all lands part swamp. We have a few utility lands like Castle Lochthwain, Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Maze of Ith, Rogue's Passage, Shizo, Death's Storehouse, and Vault of the Archangel. I only included 4 fetch lands: March Flats, which can get both of our colors, Verdant Catacombs and Windswept Heath, which can get one of our colors, and then Prismatic Vista, which can get any of our colors of basic lands. I only will mention this card because it fits in perfectly with our strategy, so if your budget can't afford it, or you can't proxy it, don't worry about it. Serra's Sanctum is a bomb in this deck. I am running 32 lands in the list that I provided, but if you find that you need more lands, you absolutely should run as many as 36 lands. We're on a pretty low mana curve, with only 11 cards in the deck costing 4 or more mana, with our most expensive spell costing 5. This deck is such a fun and fresh new take on an enchantment deck. I wouldn't quite call this a pillow fort deck or a group hug deck per se, though it does share qualities of both. Eriette's first ability lets us protect ourselves by enchanting our opponents' creatures, which is a very unique ability that incentivizes us helping our opponents, and so this can offer a good political game. Table talk and deals can be much easier with this deck, given how you will be able to make or break a player with your spells. The secondary ability, burning opponents for our aura count, is not something we've discussed much this far in the video, but it is a very easy way to keep our life total high while slowly whittling down opponents. Our opponents will likely try to attack us with their non-enchanted creature, as our deck only works on enchanted creatures, but we can easily work around that with our life gain. We can even utilize cards like Sigarda's Aid to make our auras into instant speed responses to help keep our life total safe, but pitting our opponents against one another. And with that, we're at the end of our look at building Eriette of the Charmed Apple. What do you think of this deck? Is this something you'd like to build too? Leave a like down below if you want to build this, and feel free to comment your suggestions for this deck. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button to make sure you never miss an upload, and as always, I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope to see you all next video.